I moved to Cedar Grove a few weeks ago. I was looking for peace and a fresh start as a freelance graphic designer. The small town felt charming with its vintage shops and cozy cafes. When I arrived, I thought I had found the perfect place. I rented a small house on the outskirts, believing the community would understand me. But I had no idea what would happen next. The first few days were quiet. I settled in and worked on my designs. I took evening walks, enjoying the calm. On my second night, I heard it. The chanting floated through my open window. It was soft, but rhythmic. I thought maybe it was just a neighbor's gathering. I brushed it off, but something about it felt very wrong. The next day, things got even weirder. As I went out to buy groceries, I noticed people staring at me. They watched me with strange eyes, whispering to each other. I hurried past, my heart racing. Later that night, the chanting returned. It was louder now, and I couldn't shake the feeling. I thought maybe I was just overly tired from the move. Each day felt more uncomfortable. I found little notes in my mailbox. One read, "You can't hide from them." I was shocked. Who were they? I didn't dare mention it to anyone. I wondered if they really were watching me. I started feeling paranoid. I avoided leaving my house. Every time I did, I caught glimpses of groups standing at a distance. They watched me and whispered to each other. Maybe I was the outsider here. But deep down, it felt darker. One evening, I picked up my camera. I thought maybe taking pictures would help me focus on something normal. As I walked into the nearby woods, the chanting erupted again. My heart pounded. I felt cold and scared. Every instinct told me to turn back, but I kept going. Then I saw them. A group of people stood about 20 feet away, staring at me. I called out, "Are you okay?" But they didn't reply. It felt like time stood still. I could barely breathe. I turned to run, but one of them whispered, "We've been waiting for you." That's when the fear truly gripped me. As I raced back, I realized the chanting wasn't just a sound. It was a call meant for me. I needed answers. The next day, I resolved to confront them. I marched into the woods again, my heart pounding louder than ever. I wasn't going to be scared anymore. When I arrived, they stood in a circle, their faces blank. "What do you want from me?" I shouted, my voice shaking. One stepped forward. "You were chosen," they said. "The town needs you." I didn't understand. "For what?" "Your art brings us life," another said, pointing to my camera. "We guide you." I felt a shiver run down my spine. I turned to run again, but a hand grabbed my arm, urging me to stay. Suddenly, it all clicked. The notes, the whispers, the chants. This was not just some odd small town. They weren't watching. They were waiting for me to join them. My mind raced with confusion and fear. I had found community, but at what cost? I didn't know what to do. All I knew was I could never return home. As I stood there, tangled in shadows, I finally understood. I was part of them now. I stood in that eerie circle, the whispers fading, but the weight of their words still pressing heavily on me. Part of me screamed to run, to escape the strange pull I felt towards them. But another part was curious, or perhaps entranced, by the idea of being wanted and needed. "What do you mean by my art?" I asked, trying to sound more confident than I felt. They exchanged glances as if weighing their response. "You will see," one said cryptically. They stepped back, and the group resumed their chanting. The sound swelled, wrapping around me like a thick fog. If this was a dream, I wanted to wake up, but something kept me rooted to the spot, the need for answers anchoring me. I turned my camera on them, hoping it might reveal more than I understood. The lens focused on their faces, blank yet expectant. Flashes of light broke through the darkness, and for a moment I thought I could capture something beyond their eerie expressions. Instead, the moment hung in the air, heavy with unspoken words. Just as suddenly, the chanting cut off. They stood completely still, staring at me with intensity. "Follow," one of them commanded, stepping aside. Against my better judgment, I found my feet moving. I was drawn into the woods deeper, the trees closing around us. With every step, my hesitation grew, but I was fueled by a mix of fear and intrigue. What would they show me? What could they possibly want? We reached a clearing lit by moonlight, revealing an ancient stone altar surrounded by twisted trees. I felt an almost magnetic pull towards it. My camera rested in my hands, but I didn't lift it. Something felt sacred here. "Paint!" one of the figures urged, and to my surprise, a small easel and paints appeared at my feet. "This is your calling." "What? I can't paint. I'm a graphic designer," I protested, my voice shaking. But all eyes were upon me, waiting. "Your vision is needed here," they said. "The colors of your imagination will reignite our village. Paint your truths, and they will bring us back." Panic surged within me. "Back from where?" I questioned, my heart racing. "What happened?" As if hearing my thoughts, the wind picked up, rustling the leaves and creating a cacophony that drowned out my voice. Suddenly, a painful image flickered through my mind. A dark history of the town, shadows creeping into every corner, stories of lost lives and faded colors. And then everything went dark. It felt as though the ground beneath me was shifting. I stumbled backwards, my breath hitching. The group remained unchanged, their expressions unreadable. "Let go of your fear and paint," they urged again, their words echoing like a spell. In that moment, I felt trapped. The choice was pressing down on me, demanding an answer I wasn't ready to give. I wanted to escape, to break free from this otherworldly pull. But then I saw it, on the altar, a carving. I leaned closer, breathing heavily as the light of the moon illuminated it. The symbol was one I had seen before, on the notes in my mailbox. I turned, my heart pounding. "I found it! The symbol! What does it mean?" A figure stepped forward, a deep urgency in their voice. "It's what binds us. You must decide quickly, or we will all be lost." My stomach dropped. This was just the beginning. I had walked into something far bigger than myself. I needed to choose, join them, or run. But I knew deep down that escape was growing more and more unlikely. I took a step back, staring at the altar, my heart racing. The carving pulsed in the moonlight, almost alive, and my breath came in shallow gasps. "What do you mean? We will all be lost?" I asked, desperate for clarity. One of the figures stepped closer, and I caught the flicker of fear in their eyes. We were once vibrant, full of life and art. But darkness came. We faded. Without your truth, we will vanish completely. The urgency in their voice sent a chill down my spine. The gravity of their words sank in. I was more than an observer. I was part of this unfolding drama. I looked down at the easel and the paints. They waited expectantly, like a spell woven into reality. I wanted to run. The memories of my life and the safety of home called to me, but another part of me ached to understand. I had always been drawn to stories, to the voices of those who felt unseen. Maybe this was my chance to give voice to something lost. My hands trembled as I reached for the paintbrush. "What should I paint?" I asked, my voice cracking. "Your truth," they answered in unison. "What haunts you?" I thought of the notes, the feeling of being watched. Was it this town itself that called to me? I closed my eyes, letting the images flood my mind. The shadows, the stories, and the strange whispers. I envisioned a mural, a celebration of the past and the anguish of the present. But as I opened my eyes to dip the brush, dread washed over me. What if I failed? What if I painted something wrong? I hesitated, fear embedding itself firmly in my gut. "Time is running out," the voice echoed. "You must begin." Without thinking, I struck the brush to the canvas. Bold strokes of color flew across the easel. Each brushstroke felt electric, unearthing something deep within me. I painted the dark figures of the villagers who'd been lost, their faces etched with sorrow. Then strokes of vibrant hues for the hope I desperately wanted to embody. It was raw, untamed. It felt like a portal. To my horror, as I painted, the figures began to shimmer. Their sorrow transformed into vivid grief, and the shadows around the clearing shifted. They twitched and writhed, as if the act of creation was stirring something from slumber. "Stop!" I shouted, panic rising. I could feel the world around me twisting. I couldn't tell if it was the power of my strokes or the pull of the darkness they spoke of. A terrible wind swept through the clearing, making the trees bend and groan. One of the figures shouted above the howling wind. "Finish it! Complete the truth!" I pressed on, though my vision blurred with fear. My heart raced as I realized the painting was no longer just about me. It held the essence of the village. The darkness slithered closer, and shadows danced dangerously on the edges of the clearing. Suddenly, the forest shifted. I looked up, and where trees had stood, dark shapes began to emerge, figures draped in despair, their features twisted and wild. It seemed I had awakened something more than memories. "Please!" I shouted. "What do I do?" "Paint through the pain," they chanted. Just then, something deep within surged. I felt connected to them, to the town, but also to their darkness. Everything around me blurred, colors merging into chaos. And then, just like that, I heard a scream, a different, primal sound cutting through the night like glass shattering. My heart sank as I realized it was one of the figures, their terror reflected in my own. The ground beneath me trembled, and for the first time, I felt the weight of their history press down. I was in way over my head. I had to finish, before it was too late. But who else would have to pay if I did? I had no idea what to expect as I gripped the brush tighter. The cold sweat on my palms was overwhelming. I forced myself to focus, to recall the faces of those lost. I painted with wild strokes, letting raw emotion dictate my movements. The colors splashed onto the canvas, narrowing my world down to that simple act of creation. The once distant shadows approached, their bodies morphing into grotesque forms. A chorus of whispers filled the air. "Finish," they pleaded, urgency tainting their tone. "We cannot remain like this." I plunged my brush into darker hues, reflecting the grief in my chest. But with every stroke, I felt a pull from the shadows, as if they wanted me to trap their essence on that canvas. A sense of danger thrummed around me, tightening like a vice. Then something shifted. The air sparked with energy. I glanced around, heart pounding. The once static figures were now advancing, compelled by a force I couldn't comprehend. Their eyes glowed, pleading, accusing. I gasped as I caught a glimpse of what lay behind them, a shifting mass of darkness growing larger, creeping closer. The shift in their demeanor reignited my panic. "No!" I shouted, fighting the urge to flee. I had come too far to turn back. With sheer determination, I added fine details to the figures' faces, blending their sorrow into despair. I wanted to capture everything, their history, their pain, their hope. The truth surged within me, but it threatened to overwhelm my senses. Suddenly, the ground shook violently, sending me stumbling backward. "Do not stop!" the figures cried out, their voices merging into a haunting melody. I clenched my jaw and steadied myself. I couldn't let them down. I couldn't let them fade away. As I leaned closer to the painting, the sensation of being watched returned, stronger than ever. I could feel eyes boring into my back, and fear gripped me again. "What is happening?" I shouted, spinning around, expecting to confront whatever lurked in the darkness. But the clearing was empty. I returned to the canvas, breathing heavily. The haunting melody of the figures persisted, pushing me forward. I painted deeper shadows, weaving their stories into every stroke. Just as I laid the brush against the canvas again, something caught my attention. A flicker in the corner of my eye. I turned, heart racing. That's when I saw it, a dark outline creeping through the trees behind me. The shadows had grown restless, as if something was stirring them awake for a reason. My breath hitched in my throat. They were warning me. I needed to finish. But what if the shadows were trying to possess me? The urgency of completing the mural gnawed at my thoughts. "Please hurry," they urged as the darkness pulsed at the edges of my vision. The figures loomed closer, their forms too vivid to ignore. Somewhere in the depths of my mind, a whisper called to me. "Don't let them take you." I poured the last ounce of my fear into the painting. But what would happen when I was done? The weight of their despair wrapped around me like a shroud. Then, just as I added the final stroke, everything went dark. I blinked, darkness swirling around me. For a moment, I believed I had crossed into another realm. The cold air felt sharper, more biting than before. My heart thudded heavily in my chest, and my breath came out in short gasps. Where had the clearing gone? I reached out, fingers brushing against something smooth and rough at the same time. The canvas. The weight of the brush was still in my hand. I closed my eyes, trying to summon the flickers of light I'd seen through the brush strokes. The urgency of the figures felt more pronounced in the silence. "Where are you?" I breathed into the void, my voice trembling. Suddenly, a soft light began to emerge, casting shadows that shifted like living beings. I could make out the outline of the painting, but it was different now. The shadows I'd captured were still trapped within it, but they were more vivid, almost thrumming with energy. "Help us," a voice whispered. It was achingly familiar, more haunting now than before. Panic settled deep into my bones. The figures had become clearer, their features almost tangible, their tormented expressions scrunching into fearful grimaces. I tried to step closer, but an unseen force pushed me back. "No, you cannot leave," another voice answered, more insistent. The whispers echoed back and forth, drowning out my thoughts. "Let me help you," I yelled, but the words felt empty in the void around me. Did they even hear me? Then I realized I was tethered here, bound by this desire to aid the lost souls blending into shadows. I raised the brush again, desperate to transfer my fear into creation. With each stroke, light glimmered at the edges of the canvas, illuminating the pain etched on their faces. But as I painted, the light flickered, and shadows surged around me, threatening to engulf everything. Then the whispers turned chaotic, mixing with shrieks of despair. "Finish or we'll be trapped," they cried out. I felt a shudder in the air, as if my own fears were materializing, cloaked in the veil of shadow. In that moment, gripping the brush felt weighty. I had to trust myself. I had to finish what I started, if only to set them free. I pressed my brush to the canvas with renewed purpose, but with every stroke, the shadows seeped closer. A chill wrapped around me like a tightening ribbon, stifling my breath. That's when I noticed something lurking at the edge of the painted scene, a dark figure emerging from the bottom corner. Its gaze was unyielding, a void threatening to swallow everything whole. "Stop!" it roared. Panic surged through me. A jolt of instinct urged me to turn away from the painting, to escape the clutches of whatever this presence had become. But the energy thrumming from the mural felt like a pulse. If I didn't contribute, the turmoil would consume me. "Please don't!" the figures cried, contributing to the collective lament. I glanced back at the painting, horrified to see the faces twisting into anguished masks. "What are you?" I gasped, feeling the shadows swirl violently around my ankles. It would be so easy to succumb. I had to act fast. I faced the darkness in the painting, certain I was running out of time. My fingers traced the outlines of the desperate souls trapped within. Would completing the mural finally release them, or seal my own fate? I pushed through the fear, urging me to run, gripping the brush like a lifeline. The chaotic whispers reached a fever pitch, and I felt the shadows tighten around me. I had to finish my work. The faces were pleading with me, twisting in torment. "I'm not giving up," I shouted into the void. I dove back into my painting faster, bolder strokes. As the vibrant colors flowed onto the canvas, the light around me flickered again. It felt like time was compressing. The air thickened with tension. Suddenly, the dark figure surged forward from the lower corner, breaking through the painted surface. Its eyes bore into mine. I shuddered, but I couldn't look away. "You think you can help them?" it sneered, voice dripping with contempt. The aura around it pulsated like a heartbeat, drawing in shadows that cascaded around my feet. "No," I said, my voice shaky but resolute. "I have to try." I pushed my fear into the brush, forcing color and light into the faces on the canvas. The strokes emitted a warm glow, and for a moment, it felt like I was making progress. The anguished expressions softened, hope flickering there. But the dark presence wasn't finished. With a deafening roar, it surged forward, clawing at the edges of the painted scene. "You'll be trapped here with them if you continue." It loomed larger, shadows spilling out like tendrils seeking to capture me. My heart raced as I felt the pull of its presence. The deeper I went into the colors, the weaker I felt. "I can't stop now," I whispered, forcing my hand to move. I painted as if the lives of those inside depended on it, because they did. Each stroke sent tremors rippling through the air. The trapped souls began to rise, reacting to the colors swirling around them. They reached out, fingers stretching toward my brush, and for a moment I thought I could pull them free. But then the darkness crackled, pushing against my light. "You're just a girl with a brush," the dark figure snarled, the shadows swirling violently at its command. My brush began to feel like a fluttering bird in my grip. "You're nothing." "Maybe," I replied defiantly, breathing hard. "But I'm trying." Each stroke of the brush propelled me forward. I felt the pull of despair, the comfort of the shadows. My old fears that once haunted me were creeping back. Then everything shifted. The painted scene stretched and warped, the figures amalgamating into a torrent of color. I gasped as the grip of darkness tightened again, pulling me toward its depths. The faces transformed into a whirl of emotions, fear, anger, hope, and they began to coalesce around the shadows. That's when I saw it. A glimmer breaking through the chaos, a small flicker of light that seemed to pulse with life. "Finish it!" a voice broke through, the softest yet most urgent of the cries. Those figures weren't just wanting to escape. They were ready to fight back as well. But as I focused on that flicker, a surge of energy erupted from the dark figure. It lunged forward with terrifying speed, and I knew I couldn't keep up. Panic clawed at my throat. I was running out of time, and the darkness felt impossibly close. "Let go!" I yelled to the shadows, my voice shaking. But as the last word escaped me, the world around me spun wildly, and with one final stroke, everything went silent. I blinked, my eyes adjusting to the abrupt stillness around me. The color swirled into a calm sea, and I felt weightless, as if I were floating above the canvas. I took a deep breath, trying to center myself as my heart raced. Where was the dark figure? Where were the tortured souls? Slowly, I became aware of my surroundings. I was no longer inside my studio, but in a wide, sunlit room that seemed both familiar and foreign. The walls were lined with paintings, much like the one I had been working on, each filled with emotions I recognized. Some looked hopeful, while others dripped with despair. It was like I had stepped into a gallery of forgotten dreams. I stood up, trying to shake off the remnants of fear. My fingers tingled where they had held the brush, and I glanced down at my hands. To my surprise, they were color-stained but unharmed, a stark contrast to the chilling encounter I had just endured. I took a cautious step forward and felt an odd pull from one of the paintings, a deep, swirling blue that reminded me of the ocean during a storm. "What is this place?" I whispered, half expecting someone to answer. As I moved closer to the blue canvas, I felt an unsettling vibe, like a low hum vibrating through the air. The depth of the colors beckoned me, whispering promises of understanding and answers. Just then, the feeling of being watched washed over me again. I turned sharply, my pulse quickening. I saw a figure emerging from the shadows of the room. It was tall, cloaked in a long black coat with a hood pulled low over their face. I couldn't make out any features, but I felt the dark energy radiating from them. My instincts screamed at me to run, but I was rooted in place, torn between fear and curiosity. "Who are you?" I managed to ask, my throat dry and tight. "You have crossed into their realm," it answered, voice smooth yet menacing. "You've meddled with forces beyond your understanding." I swallowed hard, ready to argue back, but part of me feared it was true. The warmth of the canvases around me faded, and I felt a chill wrap around my spine. I was trying to help. "They need me," I said defiantly, hoping to cling to some sense of purpose. "A noble sentiment," the figure sneered as the shadows twisted around its feet. "But they are not the only ones in need. You have drawn their attention. They will come for you." I took a step back, the reality of my situation crashing down like heavy waves. What did it mean? Were the trapped souls still in danger? Frantically, I scanned the room, noticing that several canvases now depicted scenes of struggle and chaos, faces merging into disarray. Then it struck me. Each painting showed different aspects of the same eternal battle between light and dark, a fight I had inadvertently stepped into. "I just wanted to paint," I said, half to myself, half to the figure in front of me. "I didn't want any of this." The figure leaned closer, its presence overwhelming. "Too late for that," it hissed. "Now you must choose your path." Before I could respond, the gallery began to shake. Paintings rattled, and the ground trembled beneath me. I felt trapped again, caught in the turmoil I had tried to escape. As the room spun, the dark figure turned to mist, dissipating into the shadows. And then I heard it, a soft but piercing cry. One of the faces was in danger. Panic surged through me. I had to make a decision. I could flee or fight. But if I left, what would happen to them? With my heart pounding, I rushed to the blue canvas, determined to finish what I started. I had to find that flicker of hope again, for their sake and for mine. But even as I reached for the brush, I could feel the darkness looming behind me, ready to strike. My hand brushed the blue canvas, and a powerful surge of energy shot through me. It felt alive, pulsing with a heartbeat that matched my own. I closed my eyes, trying to block out everything but the need to connect, to pierce through the surface and reach those trapped within. Images flooded my mind. I saw flashes of faces and heard whispers of their stories, pleading for release. I gripped the brush tightly, feeling the cool wood against my fingers. "I'm here," I whispered, desperate to pull them closer to me, desperate to help them. But as I began to paint, the shadows around the room thickened. The energy shifted, and I felt the cold presence behind me again. It clawed at my thoughts, trying to pull me away from the canvas. "You cannot save them," a familiar voice taunted. It was the figure, now more a disembodied echo than a looming presence. "They are lost." "No!" I shouted, voice wavering but filled with resolve. "I refuse to believe that." I dipped the brush into vibrant colors. Each stroke ignited sparks of light within the dark chaos, illuminating the forms trapped in the depths of despair. As I painted, I felt the pulling sensation intensify. It was no longer just the darkness. Something else was colliding with my will, as if the very room were fighting against my efforts. Suddenly, the canvases began to warp. The once static images twisted and writhed. The faces trapped inside howled in silent agony, their eyes searching for escape. A wave of panic crashed over me. My heart thudded. I focused, trying to channel all my energy into the brush. I had to finish the painting, had to find a way to break the cycle of suffering. "Stop!" the figure howled, its voice booming through the gallery. "You're only making it worse!" I gritted my teeth, pushing through the onslaught of doubt. "I will not give up," I yelled, my voice echoing against the walls. I pressed on, color splashing across the canvas in desperate strokes. But then, out of the corner of my eye, I noticed something strange. One of the paintings, the one that had first drawn me in, was starting to glow. The swirling blue began to ripple, casting a light that somehow felt warm against my skin. It was as if it was beckoning me, inviting me to look closer. That's when I saw it. Within the canvas, a hand reached out, a solid figure fighting against the tide of darkness, reaching for me. It was a soul I'd seen before, a woman with long hair twisted in despair. "Help me," she mouthed silently, desperation radiating from her. My heart sank. She was among the trapped. That moment of clarity reignited my will. If I could free one, perhaps I could free them all. I didn't know how, but I had to try. As I turned back to my painting, I felt the shadows grow heavier, almost suffocating. Their presence was palpable, crawling over my skin like 100 icy fingers. The dark figure's laughter reverberated through the space. "You're too late. The end is near." With a fierce determination, I raised the brush again, ready to fight back. But then, a new sensation swept over me, a whispering chaos begging for my attention. "Come to us," it said. A soft seduction laced with danger, as if inviting me to surrender to the dark. I faltered. Where was my way out? Now I felt lost, confused, and more than a touch terrified. I had stepped into something enormous, something I might not be able to tame. "Stay strong," I repeated to myself, even as the power around me shifted and the walls began to close in. I knew I was on the edge of a decision that could change everything. Just as I prepared to dive back into the battle of light against darkness, the cry echoed again, this time sharper, filled with urgency. It was her, the woman from the canvas. I needed to act. My next stroke could be the difference between salvation and despair. What would happen if I failed? The thought chilled me to the bone. The room spun as I tried to focus on the painting. The shadows loomed larger, creeping closer, and the icy fingers wrapped around my throat, threatening to choke out my ability to breathe. My heart raced, and my grip on the brush tightened. I couldn't let fear win. I took a deep breath, summoning every ounce of courage. "I can't give up," I reminded myself. "I'm not finished." With that thought, I dipped the brush back into the vibrant colors, summoning light to chase away the darkness. As I made a bold stroke across the canvas, the blue swirled, responding in a surge of energy that echoed through my fingertips. The shadows jerked back momentarily, as if stung by my actions. I could sense the turmoil in the trapped souls growing restless and anxious, their faces shifting between hope and despair. Suddenly, I heard her voice again, a soft whisper beneath the chaos. "Please, help me." I turned back to the glowing blue canvas, focusing solely on the woman's face. Her despair struck me like a dagger. I needed to reach her. "Hold on!" I shouted, desperation spilling out of me. I closed my eyes again, visualizing her hand, the outstretched fingers, and filled my stroke with determination. As the brush made contact with the canvas this time, a blinding light erupted from the canvas, filling the room with warmth and power. But then it happened. Something unexpected. The light coalesced into a beam that shot upward into the gallery ceiling, creating cracks in the air itself. A sudden rush of wind swept through the room, deepening the shadows as they fought back. The figure's laughter morphed into a deep growl, rumbling like thunder. "You think you can defy me?" Panic surged through me as my breath hitched, pain lancing through my chest. "Stop!" I yelled into the chaos, the figure's voice colliding with my own. Each heartbeat seemed to thrum a warning that I was teetering on the edge of the unknown. In that moment, the truth hit me like a slap. The woman in the painting wasn't just any soul. She was the key. If I could break her connection to this darkness, maybe I could pull her free, along with the others. This wasn't just my battle, but theirs too. I focused, centering all my intent on the woman. "You are not alone," I declared, channeling my fear into strength. As my brush connected with the canvas again, the shadows writhed and shrieked, thrashing against the power of the light that now coursed through me. Then, with a surge that felt like a tidal wave, the canvas cracked open. A fragment of the dark breath spilled out, a ghostly figure writhing in rage and despair. I staggered back, the overwhelming stench of despair clawing at my throat. "Run!" the woman cried out, her voice ringing clear. But where to? I was encased in a torrent of chaos, surrounded on all sides as the darkness surged toward me. With every ounce of will, I dashed forward, grabbing the woman's hand that had materialized from the canvas. "Hold on!" I shouted, but the shadows decomposed into a swirling mass, beginning to seal her back away. I felt her strength waning. The choice now was clear. Either I would plunge deeper into the chaos or let go and ensure my own escape. But deep down, I knew leaving would mean abandoning the battle to save countless others. Before I could process my decision, the room shook violently and everything went dark. I blinked, finding myself back in the woods, but the chanting had stopped. The figures were gone. The enormous pressure of the moment, heavy and suffocating, had lifted, leaving only a lingering echo of their voices. My heart raced as I took a step back, disoriented. I stood alone in the clearing, the moonlight filtering through the trees. The ancient altar I had instinctively approached was nothing now but a stone slab marred by time and neglect. Fear and relief coursed through me in tandem. Had it all been a waking nightmare? Or had I truly encountered something otherworldly? I stumbled backward, still grasping the brush I had painted with, realizing it was slick with color, remnants of my frantic attempt to capture the souls within the darkness. My fingers trembled around it, and I quickly dropped it to the forest floor. What if I had failed? What if they were still trapped? I took a deep breath, willing myself to stay calm as I moved toward the exit, heart thundering in my chest. I needed to get away. The town, Cedar Grove, beckoned me, the quaint streets now feeling like a prison. With every step, I felt the shadows of the woods linger behind me, almost as if they were searching. But the more I walked, the more the sense of dread seeped away. I made it out of the woods, back onto the main road, the soft glow of streetlights illuminating the path ahead. I thought I'd left it behind, but a gnawing anxiety coiled in my stomach. Hadn't I done enough? How would I ever know their fate? I reached my car, the familiar contours comforting in this surreal moment. As I sat inside, I glanced in the rearview mirror. I half expected to see those haunting eyes watching me, those of the villagers or the dark figure. Nothing, just the darkness of the night and the soft hum of the engine. I turned on the ignition and drove away from Cedar Grove. The unease curled tightly in my chest, the memory of those lost souls never truly fading. I could still feel their weight upon me, even as I left them behind. A week later, I found myself in a new town, the layout unfamiliar but cozy. I tried to keep my thoughts on the present, the art I could create, the designs waiting to bloom in my mind. But in the quiet moments, I still thought about Cedar Grove. What happened to that mural? Was it now a vibrant testament to tangled histories, or had the darkness seized it, sinking it back into obscurity? I hesitated, finger hovering over my camera, hesitant to indulge in the memories of what transpired in those woods. Had I imagined it all? Was I just another girl who succumbed to the fears that haunt every artist? Sometimes I check small-town news out of a morbid curiosity. I saw an article once about Cedar Grove. It mentioned a gathering of sorts, people meeting on dark nights to celebrate what they called the lost lineage. But there was no mention of me, no mention of what happened in the woods. I guess some stories don't get told, and some shadows remain. I've settled into this new life, yet I can't quite shake the feeling that a part of me is still back there, tangled in the threads of darkness and light, a part of a community I never truly understood. As I settled in for the night, my hand brushed against a faint, faded mark on my arm, a lingering reminder of the touch of shadows. Perhaps my brush would never feel the same again, but maybe it didn't matter. I would create something new, each creation a thread that holds my truth, and my unresolved questions lingered like shadows in the corners of my mind. I moved to a different city after that. Sometimes I wonder if Cedar Grove ever returned to its former self, if the figures still remain, longing for light. But mostly, I try not to think about it.